Hey everyone, so Dear Evan Hansen came out last week, and well, you've seen the reviews. I won't talk about it too much. I basically agree with all the problems that everybody has. I'm gonna look at something a bit more specific. You've read the title, you know what I'm talking about. Why Dear Evan Hansen would have been better without Evan Hansen. Like I said, I won't go too much into like the problems that everybody has with Evan Hansen, such as, Ben Platt being twice the age of the character. What I really want to talk about is specifically the character of Evan Hansen and how the film could have worked so much better without him. He really isn't necessary and only hurts the film. So, I'm going to break this video into two parts. The first part will examine the character of Evan Hansen, and the second part will look at why the film would have worked better and how the film could have looked without him. So, the character of Evan Hansen has some problems. And I'm not saying that having a protagonist with mental health issues is a bad thing at all. I think that that's a great thing. I think that there needs to be more representation of mental health in film. The problem is when it's not well represented, but the film thinks it's representing it well, and then it's used as an excuse, but then it's not well represented, so then it just comes across as petty, and it does not leave a good taste. So I talked about how Evan Hansen's anxiety was set up. The film spends the first 20 minutes or so exploring his anxiety, and it definitely gets across the point that he is anxious, but it shows us that he is anxious through awkward situations. And yes, you will be more embarrassed and more anxious with anxiety in awkward situations. But that doesn't mean that people who don't have anxiety wouldn't still be embarrassed. So if that's going to be like the crux of the film, like this is the thing of the film, Evan Hansen has mental health problems, this is why he's doing all of this stuff, these terrible things, then maybe it should be set up a little better. Just a thought. And then from there, he does some stuff, as we see him start to spiral and just become a terrible person. The film is using anxiety as an excuse. It feels like the film is treating mental health as a plot device rather than the emotional core of the film. I mean, I don't care about Evan Hansen. The movie made me almost instantly dislike him, and I should be the target demographic. I'm a teenager who has mental health problems, so I should like this movie and really connect to it, but I don't. I felt nothing towards the character of Evan Hansen other than hatred. Maybe that's an over-exaggeration. And as the film goes on, my dislike for the character only grew. He's leading this family whose son just died through emotional peril. Like, he's horribly messing with them and lying to them, and then it's implied that he's doing it just to be with a girl who he already had a crush on. And that's like the only reason, and like, spoilers, she's still kind of fine with him after he is found out to be like a terrible person and she realizes that he was lying the whole time. It makes absolutely no sense. On the whole, I feel like this movie had so much potential to represent mental health. I really do. But this was not the way to go about it. Okay, so now that I've talked about the character of Evan Hansen, I feel like there's a couple important distinctions to make as we get into the second part of this video. One is that there's a difference between having an unlikable protagonist and that being the way that the story is supposed to be told, and a protagonist that we're supposed to like and supposed to empathize with and supposed to root for that we end up just hating. I also want to specify that if you just took Evan Hansen out of the movie as it was, first of all, you'd have like a 10-minute movie, and second of all, no, that wouldn't work. What I'm saying when I say that the film would have been better without Evan Hansen is if you let the story play out as it did, but the character of Evan Hansen wasn't present and you focused on other characters. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. because I think that having an unlikable protagonist is fine. The problem comes when you have a protagonist that is supposed to be likable that is not, and that is exactly what Evan Hansen is. So, how would I make the film better with the exclusion of Evan Hansen? 1. More Amandla Stenberg. She's phenomenal. She's so incredible. I've loved Amandla Stenberg since, The Hate You Give. Even when she was young and she was Rue in the Hunger Games. She's always been phenomenal. She's great again in this. I empathized so much with her character, 100 times more than Evan Hansen. That isn't even hyperbolic, because Evan Hansen was in the negatives. Then I don't think the math works, but you know what I mean. Amandla Stenberg was great. She wrote the only good song in the movie, and I wanted more of her character. So I guess minor spoilers for Dear Evan Hansen. The Broadway show's been out for 4 or 5 years now, so I feel comfortable talking about spoilers, even though it's only been a little over a week since the film came out. If you essentially do the same thing that this film does, except focus on Amandla Stenberg from the start and all of her struggles, which felt so much more real, even though we only heard her mention them and we didn't actually see them like we did with Evan Hansen. Focus on that from the start, empathize with her and her character's constant need to feel validated, and pushing all of her mental health problems aside and putting up a smokescreen of accomplishments to hide it, which I think is so much more interesting and so much more relatable. From there, the film plays out as it did. Connor kills himself, and the whole school reels from it, but moves on very fast. Amandla Stenberg's character kind of takes charge, and she serves as the leader of all of these organizations, just like she did in the original film. We are seeing this all from her perspective. We get to see more of her inner conflict like we did in just really one scene. The scene where she posts Evan Hansen's letter to himself that was believed to be Connor's letter to Evan, and was also seen as his suicide note. In my version of the film, we could dive more into Amandla Stenberg's character's mixed feelings on everything, and trying to do what is right, while also being so incredibly nervous and anxious about everything, and making a lot of wrong choices along the way. And also just looking more at that scene, which I do think is the best scene in the film. Connor's family got a lot of hate, and that could be where we see a lot of the conflict of the story come from. Amandla Stenberg trying to, 1, rally students, and the students resisting, but eventually getting everybody together, and once they start to get their message out, they do get positive responses, but they also get a lot of negative responses. And we could really focus in on Amandla Stenberg's character believing that it is all her fault, because that is what anxiety will do to you. It makes you think that every decision you made was the wrong one, and that all of the repercussions are your fault. And I think that would be fascinating to dive into, especially with an actress as good as Amandla Stenberg at the forefront. And that's why Dear Evan Hansen would have been better without Evan Hansen. Now, I didn't absolutely hate this movie. I do think that there are redeemable qualities, but on the whole, I was not a fan. But let me know in the comments what you thought of Dear Evan Hansen, and what you thought of my pitch for a film without Evan Hansen. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, stay safe and goodbye.